Hey guys, so welcome to the watercolor studies. You guys are going to be doing 12 different techniques for this watercolor assignment. So looking at the paper here, what you guys are going to do is I recommend creating 3" by 3" squares and then creating a little 1/2" space here. You can do that with a ruler, but you can also eyeball the 3 inches as well, as long as there's a clear area for you to work in and a clear area for you to write the title for what you're doing. You must write the title of the project, of the technique, for each of them to receive full credit. Okay, so what are you going to need for this project? So you're going to go on over to this space and you're going to grab the following. You're going to grab a watercolor palette, you're going to grab a cup, you're going to grab a paintbrush. I recommend the paintbrushes that are like so. You're going to get a piece of watercolor paper. Things that you're going to be using is Clorox wipes for the alcohol technique, crayons, they are here. There is a sgraffito technique. These are the sharp objects. You'll see them right here. And then there's also salt. So let's get to it. Okay, so starting off with just a simple flat wash. So you're going to write flat wash, and the term wash is used in watercolor to just simply fill in a square. So, or a space. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab some water by making sure the brush is wet, and you're going to lightly pet one of the palettes for color. So here we go. So that is a nice flat wash. Okay. The next one is a 1 color graded wash. And this allows the color to go from light to dark. So let's create that. So I'm going to take some red, and I'm going to start at the bottom because I see I really loaded up my paintbrush. And I'm going to go dark, and then as I go up, I'm going to grab some water, and I'm going to create that lightness. And if it's still not light enough, you could grab a paper towel and dabble do it, but that's what you should see. It should go from dark to light. The next is wet on wet, and this is where the paper is already wet with water. So what you're going to do is take your paintbrush with no paint on it at all and fill in the space with just water. Then you're going to pick a color and place it on, and see how it spreads around instantly. This is great for like backgrounds and such. Okay. Next is lifting off, and you might remember it better as the tissue effect from last year. And this, you're going to grab a paper towel. So get your body on up and grab a paper towel, and you're going to fill in a space with some color. Make sure it's nice and wet. It will not work if it's not wet. And then you're going to take a paper towel and you're just going to place it down, and you're going to see the colors change from light to dark from the paper towel taking up the pigment. The next one is a 2 graded wash. So this one we did one where it's just going from light to dark, but for a 2 graded wash, you are going to start with 1 color and end up to another color. So for this one, let's go ahead and go from, I don't know, how about orange to brown? Sounds good. Here we go. So I'm going to start with orange. Adding water, and then grabbing some brown. You can use whatever colors you want because this is going to be like low-key gross, but it's okay. All right. And you're transitioning from the one color to the other. Okay. The next is the rubbing alcohol, and if you want to, so it's a good, because this is your technique sheet and something to reference if you just want to simply label it Clorox, because that's what you're using by all means. And you are going to be doing a scientific effects like you did last year, where you start with a color, and then you're going to take the paper towel and you're going to squeeze it so it drops down on your hands, and then it creates a nice white ring. Okay. The next one is the sgraffito. And this is where you're taking that sharp object from where I showed you earlier, and you're going to write your name, or honestly, you could just make a design if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a design. I'm just gonna do, because you're gonna have an opportunity to write your name with crayon later. If the paper's already wet, I'm so glad this happened. If the paper's already wet, you're gonna really rip it up. So make sure you're doing this in the dry area. I'm gonna do cross hatching, where you're just creating lines over, and you're gonna see the paper is gonna be picked up a little bit. So that way when you go to paint it, you see those lines. And see the difference between creating that graffiti on a wet spot versus a dry spot. Okay? The next is dry brush. So you're gonna dry your brush best you can. It's a little wet, it's okay. And you're gonna choose one of the colors that you already used. So brown, I kind of used a little bit and I got it on there. And you're just gonna paint on top, and you're gonna see it's like as a residue. Like that. This is really nice to add with the texture. I personally love using dry brush with my projects when I create watercolor, because it just adds a little extra, especially if you do it in a color to enhance a color underneath, which is really nice. All right, splatter. So splatter, you gotta get your brush wet, and then you're gonna grab a color. And you gotta go tap, 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 tap. It's okay if it gets in the other boxes, because this is a technique sheet, not a perfection sheet. And write splatter underneath. Okay. So there, I'm gonna split this in half because I feel we need to do one bonus technique. So we are going to do glazing, and we are going to do the salt technique. Okay, so that way you have them, and then the last two are going to be the crayon and the pen and ink. So here we go. So glazing has got to be very similar to the two graded wash, where you're working with two or more colors. So you can go beyond two, where you're layering colors on top. I really feel this technique goes well with the lifting off technique, because then if it gets too heavy with the top color, you can pat it down to expose the bottom color. So let's go ahead, put some orange. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let that sit. I'm gonna let it dry. So that's why I split it in half, so we could do the salt technique really quick. So the salt technique is one you might remember from last year. You're gonna grab some color, fill in the space, and grab a pinch of salt that's over by the paintbrushes, and you're gonna see the polka dots, okay? So now that's dry, you're gonna grab another color. I'm gonna take some red. I'm gonna put it on top. Now notice it's really dominating. It's not, you're not able to see the orange anymore. So that's why I really recommend give it a pat, and you can really start to see the orange start to show through. This is really great for when you're working on your projects. Do not feel that only one layer of watercolor is the way to go. Feel free to layer and glaze with a bunch of colors to really build up a nice sense of value. Okay? The next one is crayon, and this is an opportunity to write your name, so go ahead and do that. So I wrote B, grab my paintbrush, fill it up with water, grab a color, any color, does not matter. And you're gonna paint on top of it to reveal your name like a magic trick. The last is pen and ink, where you're making a coloring book for yourself. And this, you're going to you can make anything. I'll make a cat face. How about that? Oh, this is gonna be rough. I don't think that's gonna be a cat face. How about a weird fish? He's got like a weird face. He's like, oh no, what am I? He's horrified on how this turned out. Okay, so there we go. I hope this makes you laugh. All right, so we got a crazy fish. We're gonna fill in. I recommend a smaller brush because you got smaller things and you're gonna take the time to fill it in like a coloring book. So this fish is gonna be green. And then we're gonna make the fins a different color. And then last is we're gonna create some water around this fish. And this is a good opportunity to learn how to mix color. So your palette has a top, and this is where you can mix colors. So what you can do is make sure an area is filled. So if these things are messy, just take straight water and clean it off like so. So now you have a nice working space. And let's mix a nice blue for our weird fish. So I'm gonna take some blue, and then I'm gonna take some white, and then fill in around the fish. So when you are done with this project, you are to submit it onto Canvas. Remember, make sure you labeled. And then when you're done submitting, put it on the drying rack because you will be using this as a reference for your final project. You're definitely going to be using a number of these to apply to your final. I really recommend when you're working, there's a lot to be used here. I really, really recommend the glazing. I really recommend the lifting off. I really recommend the washes. And of course, pen and ink always looks really nice. And the crayon technique can definitely be great if you really want an area to be white. So you got a lot of great things to work with. If you have any questions, let me know. Other than that, that is it, guys. Good job. Good luck.